Good evening. I'm Kelda Yoon. Protesters continue to camp out at the University of Toronto tonight. Demonstrators set up early Thursday morning in the center of King's Circle, where they remain. But the university is now saying they have concerns about what it deems unauthorized behavior, warning protesters that they risk being charged. Anam Khan joins us live from U of T. And Anam, demonstrators, though, are unfazed, saying they will not budge until their demands are met.
That's right, Kelda. There has been an increase in demonstrators here since the evening. We've been here throughout the day. And what they're doing, it's really quiet here right now. It's peaceful. They're having dinner. And what the protesters want is three things, essentially. They want the university to disclose all of its investments and divest from businesses tied to Israel, and also end partnership with Israeli academic institutions that operate on occupied land. And so far, they say the university has been very mum on this issue. They haven't given them answers. Yesterday, there was a protest. The entire encampment began yesterday, and the university gave them a deadline of 10 p.m. And the protesters refused to leave, so the university changed its course and said, okay, you can leave if you are peaceful. But today, they're changing that. They're saying, this is unauthorized. And the protesters are not meeting the demands of a peaceful protest. So really, we have yet to see if they're going to be removed off campus. The number of tents and demonstrators continue to grow. It's day 2 of this pro-Palestinian encampment at U of T, with over 60 tents now, equipped with food and basic supplies donated from community members. As day turns into night, the university's starting to put more pressure on the protesters.
That doesn't really damper the mood or the fact that we're going to continue to be here until U of T divests from Israeli apartheid.
The university getting more stern with its words tonight, saying what started as a peaceful protest yesterday has taken a turn, and that it has concerns about safety, destruction of property, and discriminatory language. It warns, we have made it clear that these activities fall outside of our policies and relevant law and are considered unauthorized on our private property. This puts those who are in the encampment at risk of being charged with trespass and destruction of property. But the protesters say these are false accusations.
Obviously, there's nothing in the circle itself that's been destroyed. You can all see this clearly. If anything that has happened on the outside, this could be from other people that are not affiliated with us directly.
We have community guidelines, and this is not a space where hate is tolerated. So we're not tolerating anti-Palestinian racism, anti-Black racism, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism.
Some counter-protesters disagree.
But at the same time, seeing a lot of the rhetoric that's been going on, saying we don't want Zionists on our campus, hearing people chant Intifada revolution, those to me feel explicitly violent.
Today, the Jewish organization B'nai B'rith also weighing in. The notion that esteemed academic institutions would allow the sanctity of their campuses to be compromised by rogue elements of our society is deeply concerning. Protest organizers say they've tried for weeks to get the university to divest and have had meetings with administrators.
There was no sort of substantive conversation about divestment, and instead the only thing that we got was confirmation that U of T is in fact invested in weapons manufacturers and companies complicit in Israeli apartheid. But when pressed on that point, they refused to give us any additional information about the specific companies or the amount.
They add they will not cave into pressure.
And they have an ethical investments policy on their books. All we're doing is asking them to adhere to that.
Those in the encampment also have support from the union representing faculty members. Members were at the protest Thursday, where 1,000 supporters surrounded the encampment. The union says it will always defend the right to use civil disobedience and protest to further their cause.
Women take on
U of T says it asked to speak to a student contact, but they haven't been given any information. And now they're saying at this point they're unsure if the people protesting here are even students. And we reached out to police, and they say they haven't been contacted by the university for their help. And they haven't been here since yesterday. So really, we have yet to see what goes on tonight and tomorrow.
All right. Thanks so much, Anam. That's our Anam Khan reporting tonight. We have new details tonight in the case of a deadly crash on Highway 401 near Whitby this week. The Indian consulate is identifying the grandparents who died in the crash with their 3-month-old grandchild this week. In a social media post, the consulate offers their heartfelt condolences on the tragic loss of Indian nationals, Mr. Manik Vinod Mrs. Mahamakshmi and their grandchild in the collision. The Consulate General met the bereaved family at the hospital and assured all possible assistance, adding it is in touch with Canadian authorities. CBC News has reached out to the consulate for confirmation on the grandparents' full names. The first week in the trial of a Toronto man charged with murdering and dismembering his mother has come to a close. Yesterday, the judge told the jury it can accept as fact that then 20-year-old Dallas Lee did kill his mother inside their Leslieville condo in March 2022. Tyler Cheese has the latest from court.
Today, the jury heard from 3 of Dallas Lee's friends who say they received cryptic messages from Lee in the hours following his mother's death. One of those text messages shown in court today reads, "I want to do so many things, Lennon, but it isn't fair. Sorry, I am sure you saw this coming. I wasn't trying to hide it, but I got hit with an unlucky. Live well, brother." The friends say they were concerned about Lee. They went to his condo, but there was no answer. They did speak to him briefly on the phone, with Lee assuring them he was okay. Around that same time, on March 28, 2022, a woman's decapitated body was found in garbage bags along Eastern Avenue just west of Leslie Street. Investigators later identified the remains as the body of Dallas's mother, 46-year-old Tien Lee. Dallas was arrested 6 days later. He has pleaded not guilty to second-degree murder. His defense attorney has said he will testify that for practically his entire life, his mother was physically, psychologically, and emotionally abusive, and that he killed her in an attempt to leave his abusive home. One of his friends testified today that Dallas had previously told her his mother was abusive and showed her a bruise on his arm. Earlier in the trial, the jury heard from Francis Nguyen, who worked with Dallas and his mother at the nail salon she owned. Nguyen described Dallas as shy and quiet. He also said Tien had confided in him that she thought her son was lying about finding another job. Lee's aunt, who also worked at the nail salon, described the mother and son's relationship as sometimes affectionate, but she also said her sister would call Dallas lazy and say he was not intelligent. As the trial continued, the jury heard from multiple forensic investigators involved in the case. They were shown hundreds of photos taken at the Lee's condo unit, as well as the scene where the mother's body was found. The Crown also presented security video showing someone leaving the Lee's condo with a garbage bag and a shopping cart, walking east on Eastern Avenue, and then returning without the shopping cart. Today, the pathologist who examined Tien's body confirmed in court she suffered a deep, likely fatal stab wound on the left side of her neck. Multiple other wounds were also documented on her face, neck, and arms. The trial is set to resume next Wednesday. Lee is expected to testify later in the week. Tyler Cheese, CBC News, Toronto.
A York police officer is lucky to be alive after he was hit by an SUV being driven by an auto theft suspect. A warning, the video we're about to show you may be disturbing to some viewers. The incident happened on Tuesday as York officers were investigating stolen vehicles in the Thorncliffe Park and Overley Boulevard area in Toronto. They spotted 2 suspects and moved in to make arrests. One suspect takes off in a vehicle, hitting a pickup truck before striking the officer, who gets tossed in the air before landing on the pavement. Now, remarkably, he suffered only minor injuries and is already out of hospital.
Honestly, the first time I saw this video, I was very emotional. Anytime we see anyone, a member of our team, our friends being injured, it's absolutely scary, particularly knowing that this could have ended so much worse than it did.
Police managed to arrest one of the suspects, but they're still looking for the man who plowed into the officer. They're asking anyone with information to contact York Police. York Police are also looking for an arson suspect after a barbershop in Richmond Hill was set on fire earlier this week. Video surveillance captured a man pouring a liquid inside the barbershop before returning to the front of the store and setting the place on fire. Now, police were called about the incident on Wednesday at around 4 in the morning. They found the front window broken and the shop in flames.
Fortunately, Richmond Hill Fire Emergency Services were able to respond quickly. The fire was isolated to the one unit, and they were able to put it out before it was able to spread anywhere else.
It happened in the area of Yonge and Major Mackenzie. Thankfully, no injuries were reported. Police are again asking anyone with information to contact them. The federal government says it will provide $104 million to help Toronto host 6 matches at the 2026 FIFA World Cup. But critics worry that will still leave the city on the hook for more than half the cost. Municipal Affairs reporter Sean Jeffords has the details.
Toronto's World Cup hosting duties got a financial boost Friday. The federal government will contribute $104 million to help pay for 6 games Toronto will host in 2026. Federal Sport Minister Carla Qualtrough says the games will have a positive impact on the city and country.
It is estimated that FIFA will generate more than $2 billion in overall economic activity for Canada, including $395 million in projected visitor spending.
The federal cash comes in addition to $97 million from the Ontario government. But even with those contributions, Toronto taxpayers will still end up paying at least $170 million. It's a cost that comes as the city struggles to balance its budget every year, facing billion-dollar deficits. And the price tag to host the games has already jumped up $80 million from a year ago. The total now is expected to be $380 million. Olivia Chow says the city can't count on receiving more cash from other governments to cover overruns.
I don't want to use that as an assumption. I think it's much better to budget according to what you have. That's how I've always worked, and not what you want to have.
With the game still more than 2 years away, some fear cost escalation is inevitable. Councillor Josh Matlow says given the history of events like the World Cup, a further jump is likely.
We're going to be shutting down roads whenever FIFA wants us to. We're going to be hiding ugly scaffolding from dignitaries from FIFA, even though regular Torontonians have to look at construction every day. There's a lot that we're going to have to do, and I don't think we've budgeted well enough for those expectations.
Some community groups have been pushing all levels of government to ensure FIFA leaves a legacy after the games.
I think the conversation that Toronto needs to have is how are we ensuring that these dollars that are going aren't actually lining the profits of FIFA. FIFA is a multi-billion-dollar corporation with over $7 billion, nearly $8 billion in revenue just last year. We want to make sure that the money that goes into from our communities serves our communities in every possible way.
Toronto will host its first World Cup game on June 12, 2026. It'll feature the Canadian men's national team in the group stage. Sean Jeffords, CBC News, Toronto.
Welcome back. It's been 15 years since the end of the Sri Lankan Civil War. A large majority of Tamils fled the country, with the largest diaspora here in Toronto. This weekend, Ray of Hope, a documentary depicting the healing and continual strive for justice, premieres in Scarborough. Kirtan Asasitharan sat down with former Scarborough MP Rathika Setsabayisan to learn more.
When I was in Sri Lanka, I don't remember my father being around.
The 77 riots and the 83 pogroms
Was obviously the ground being pulled out from underneath everybody's lives. And so that's when my dad left to find us a better place to live.
The film doesn't just explore the history of the Civil War in Sri Lanka, but also people's personal struggle with their Tamil identity. Why do you think people struggle with that identity?
Being Tamil was a confusing identity. Growing up, when high school time was when there was a lot of gang activity in the Tamil community, and anybody who knew about Tamil people identified us as Tamil terrorists, as Tamil tigers. And so we wanted to not be classified as a terrorist or a tiger here in Canada. And so I think it was a necessary evil to kind of hide that piece of me, piece of us.
So the Sri Lankan government and the extremists, they waged a war against innocent people across the country. But as a child, one thing I know was my own government bombed their own people.
Processing a war is not easy. Being on the receiving end of a genocide and then being told that it's not, that you're actually on the wrong growing up. And many people still believe that we were wrong, we were on the wrong side of history, when truly we were on the wrong side of history, being on the receiving end of a genocide and not being able to be us as is and be proud of who we are.
Fear came up a lot in this film, and I think that's part of the healing process the film was trying to explain and showcase. What do you hope audiences take away from that conversation around fear?
I've been diagnosed with PTSD multiple times and not really dealt with it because I'm not ready to process. And I think this documentary has helped me start that healing process in starting to process. And I'm hoping that it will create spaces where we can start to have conversations, where families can start to have conversations and recognize that we as a community need to heal as well and know that you're not alone. Yes, this movie is made to tell the Tamil's story and our experience, our lived experiences. It's also the lived experiences of so many others. We shared it with a Ukrainian film producer, and she's like, this is my story. We shared it with many Africans who've come from many different countries, and they say, this is my story. So many people say, this is my story. What's happening in Gaza right now? This is their story.
There's a power in knowing what your mother tongue can do and the power that it holds over you to know your mother tongue. And someone in the film actually says, quote, Tamil is more than just a spoken language. So I have to ask you, what more is it?
Tamil is more than a spoken language. It's an identity. It's a culture. Now, 15 years after the end of the war, it's more important to be connected to your identity, for me, to my Tamil identity, because there's so much action happening to erase that, to erase the Tamil race, the language, the culture, the existence of Tamil's history even.
So I do want to bring up your trip to Sri Lanka in 2013. You said you were going on this trip for personal reasons, on a tourist visa, and not planning to do anything political. You mentioned this in the doc, actually. But you did engage with families who had lost loved ones in the war, and you said you were followed in the film. You point out that you were followed by members of the Sri Lankan government and military. Did you think what you were doing at the time was political, or even could be perceived as such because you were an MP at the time?
So I figured that while I was an MP, it was probably the safest time for me to travel, where I was living in a fishbowl. You know, I had the world's eye on me, and so I thought it would be safe. We were surveilled by multiple intelligence agencies, the CID, the Criminal Intelligence Division, the Terrorist Intelligence Division, the Immigration Division, the military or the police that they have. All of them were constantly on our case. There were at least 6 to 8 individuals surveilling us the entire time. And yes, we do explore that further in the film. What I was doing was not political. What I was doing was visiting my ancestral homeland.
But you captured a moment in your history that kind of changed the course of the way things unfolded, really.
Absolutely. Ryan, who's a filmmaker, so he wanted to have his camera out all the time and actually capture these people following us, and we were all scared. Our driver, because now they're going to be interrogated, because anybody who came in touch with me was interrogated as soon as they left me. So Ryan's, the one rule I had for him, nobody can see your camera. So he was actually on the floor of the van filming up so that nobody could see his camera.
We have now a Tamil Genocide Awareness Week in Ontario and a Tamil Genocide Remembrance Day nationally. Yeah. Is that enough to keep the conversation going?
January being recognized as Tamil Heritage Month across this country, and the recognition of Tamil genocide nationally is huge. And the Tamil Genocide Education Week in Ontario is huge. This is the largest diaspora community in the world, so it's important that we have that recognition here and that our school boards have either the responsibility or the ability, depending on which school board and how they view it.
Thanks for coming in today.
Thank you for creating the space to have the conversation.
We have Colette back with us now. And Colette, Saturday's forecast looking a little better than it did actually a few days ago.
Yeah, exactly. I've been really encouraged to see improving conditions in our forecast, especially as we go into the weekend. I do want to just point out something here from earlier with some of the active weather they've had in Texas and Oklahoma and Kansas. It's day after day after day where these things have been flaring up. And I'll tell you, there are parts of Texas around Houston where they've had over 750 millimeters of rain in a 30-day period, and nearby communities over 700 millimeters of rain that occurred in just 48 hours. So flash flooding, another problem there, not just the tornadic activity and damage they've seen from that. From earlier seeing some of the rain showers that passed through, of course, we're getting into some improving conditions, just areas where we have to deal with some of that fog development and a little bit of low cloud through the overnight hours or closer to the lakeshore. And then tomorrow morning, it'll probably take some time to get rid of a little bit of that. There'll be plenty of sunshine to the north and back towards the west as well. And just give it some time. Skies may be a little bit variable, but we should have a decent amount of sunshine kind of coming through, mix of sun and cloud through the day. It's a different story, though, Saturday night as we get into Sunday, because that's when this next system is coming through. And I know there are lots of folks looking to the forecast with the Toronto Marathon on Sunday, and not only some rainfall, but at times a few thunderstorms possible as well in the region. So locally, some heavier downpours. That'll definitely be something to keep your eyes to the sky and be watching for. Now, as we get through the day Sunday, a little later in the day, we are going to get into some clearing, and with that, some sun coming back out. So that will be better, but much later in the day Sunday. Looking pretty good, though, for tomorrow. And that high that we're looking at for Toronto, 19 degrees for tomorrow, and we may get back to 20 as soon as Monday.
I like that. Thanks so much, Colette. And that's liftoff. China launching an ambitious mission to the far side of the moon today. The uncrewed spacecraft, leaving on a nearly 2-month mission, aims to retrieve lunar rocks and soil from the side facing away from Earth. China is the first country to make such an attempt. The plan is for a lander to reach the lunar surface and scoop up rocks and soil using a robotic arm. The samples will then be returned to the orbiter, which will carry them back to Earth. And that's our show for you tonight. Thanks for joining us. We will have your next local news tomorrow at 6. Have a great weekend, everyone.